Brody, good morning. How are you, man?
I'm doing all right. How are you guys?
Doing good, buddy. Let's start with the Jayden news. Jayden Daniels news off the top. Obviously, LSU accepts the commitment yesterday out of the transfer portal. What do you make of the player, and what does it do to LSU's quarterback competition going into spring?
Yeah, I honestly think of it kind of as like I think it's a smart addition in the sense that you are kind of buying low on a guy who also has a chance to be a superstar. And I think, because I feel like there's kind of two ends of the debate of this. There's some people thinking LSU's getting this like superstar quarterback that's just like, and again, I think those people, you need to remind them that, hey, last year wasn't exactly great. There were some confidence issues and passing issues, but and off the field issues too. So LSU is kind of buying in on a guy who, his stock isn't what it was 2 years ago. That's just the reality. But at the same time, he was in a situation where, hey, off the field issues were kind of, extreme. He didn't have any receivers to throw to. He didn't have time in the pocket. It was just a messy situation. And LSU people have pointed out he also didn't really have a dedicated quarterback coach the last 2 years. His best year, 2019, was really the only time he had someone working with him full time. So I say that to say, yeah, there's a lot of reasons to talk yourself into. Jayden Daniels could be a star at LSU. I just think it also needs to be tempered, and that I think it really is a quarterback competition. And, if you remove emotion from it, I think, Brian Kelly probably viewed this as a situation where, yeah, they have a pretty stable quarterback room, but Miles Brennan's only been healthy for really, very, very little time in the last 4 seasons. So I think it was, hey, this is a guy that's hard to say no to, and they have a previous connection with Jamar Cain. And, let's make the route better. Let's add competition. Let's get a culture of competition going. And, I would put my money on Jayden Daniels winning that job. But at the same time, I wouldn't be shocked at all. I think it's a real competition, and Miles Brennan will compete. So if Miles Brennan wins the job, well, shoot, that's even better. He proved he's the right guy, and there's really no harm in taking Daniels. If Daniels wins the job, it's proof that there was room for improvement, right? So it's kind of a no-lose situation in that sense of how I view it.
Is there a situation where you see Brennan re-entering the portal?
Totally. I don't think you can rule that out by any means, And LSU people have said that they've been unbelievably transparent, they claim, with everyone in that quarterback room and explaining it to them. And I think they've also said that, Miles Brennan, maybe he didn't have the opportunities he wanted out of the portal last time, and that's part of why he came back too. So I think it is a situation where I think they'll compete, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if Miles Brennan ends up in the portal when this is all said and done. I think it would be naive to think otherwise, but I do think he's going to try to fight it out. And I do think it's a real chance, but it's just a tricky situation.
We spoke to Michael Daugherty, the four-star safety, yesterday from Logan'sville, Georgia, and got his impressions of the weekend. Junior Day, LSU hosted it over the weekend, and seemed like they had a lot of local prospects and some national prospects on campus. A lot of positive feedback, it seems like, from the weekend. Have you heard anything from LSU's coaching staff now in its entirety starting to recruit towards the future like they did last weekend in Baton Rouge?
Yeah, I think there's been a strong sense out of the program and some of the recruits as well, that I think there's been this talk of and it's been this buzzword I've been hearing for months, and hey man, it might be propaganda, but there's just this sense that even recruits are talking about, hey, Brian Kelly really has a plan. Everyone keeps talking about Kelly has a plan. It's probably the phrase I hear the most. But I think, I've seen recruits from 24/7 on 3 other places talk to them and say, yeah, like it just feels like a different building in there. And that's honestly, that's a big sign, just because some of these kids have been there before, and as well as I, so much of the mission of year one is reframing the culture, the feel of that building, all those things. That's a good sign, in my opinion, that they're getting in that situation. I think they are in a good position with your Dante Moores of the world. I think they are in a good position with a lot of those in-state kids, So I'm not going to pretend to be the recruiting expert here, but I do think this weekend was a win, and I do think they're, pretty well positioned for a good 2023.
What is the major storyline for you going into spring? I guess when you take the quarterback storyline out of it now, we've talked a little bit about it with Daniels. When you go into the next couple of weeks of LSU getting prepared for spring football, what are you most eager to watch once practice opens up?
I think the boring answer is, but the obvious one is just how transfers, fit in. Because I've said this on your show before, I think it's just so easy for people to assume a guy is coming from one place where he produced, and it's not a video game, right? It's not where you're taking a guy who's an 84 overall and he's still an 84 overall. Like, it's kind of contextual. So I think there's going to be a little bit of figuring out exactly, hey, they added 3 corners that theoretically fit into those 3 starting spots, but are all 3 of those guys really SEC starters? I don't think you'd be kind of naive to assume that, and same with Miles Frazier and Shimon Shorts on the O-line. I think those guys are really good talents, but at the same time, they're coming up from much lower levels. You just don't know. So I think that's not a negative or a positive. It's just me saying that's kind of what I'm watching to see which ones of those guys are really ready to slot right into spots. Who are like stars on SEC right away, on LSU right away? Because that's possible. Some of them might be the best players right away. Yeah. Where does a Makai Wingo? Is he a rotation guy or is he an obvious starter? I think those are the things that I'm watching for sure.
How about the faces that are returning that have been in the program? Some of the guys, because I'm with you. I think that everybody, when you show up, you look at the new faces and how they fit in. You look at the coaches and their style on the field and, what their techniques are in coaching their group. But how about a guy like, I'm not going to give you any names because I'd like to hear where you go, but just anybody who's been in the program who is, gone through this coaching transition and now going into their first spring with Brian Kelly.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch, right? I think, one that I've heard really positive things from the staff about so far has been Mike Jones, which is one, he's not necessarily like a young guy, but he's somebody who everyone had all these hopes for last year. And by the way, this falls in the exact same category before of you can't assume transfers are just plug and play. He had growing pains and whatnot, but once they went to Durante Jones' actual defense those last few weeks, where Jones was running what he wanted to run, and Mike Jones got a chance to really play, he looked pretty good. And the feedback so far through winter workouts and just getting to know these guys is they're really high on him. So I think he's one I'm just interested by. And I say it to also say I'm just so intrigued by that entire linebacker room. Not because, just because I'm always the most, I'm very boring with this, as you know, but I'm always most fascinated by rooms where there's a lot of like solid guys, but I have no idea what the pecking order is. And that's definitely one of those rooms for me where it's like, Baskerville's back, he's really stable, but his upside's not as high. Perkins is this 5-star, but he's a true freshman. Jones, I just don't know where to expect him. Is he a starter? I don't know. Does Greg Penn, the guy with massive upside, take a leap? I think I'm so intrigued by that linebacker room. Shoot, Josh White hasn't been healthy, but I still think really highly of Josh White. So, and then you added the 2 transfers. Shoot. So yeah. And then I think some others I'm definitely watching are the offensive linemen, really, because I go back to, and it's an old storyline, but Brad Davis hasn't had a full off season with these guys, and you saw the O-line get better as the year went on, and I give credit to Brad Davis for that. So now some of those sophomores, juniors, they get a real off season with him. Marlon Martinez comes to mind first. Garrett Dellinger is a huge one. Anthony Bradford to an extent. Some of these guys that I really think are solid players, but can they become real starters? I think those are the guys that I'm really intrigued by. Like Martinez or Dellinger, I can actually see them being the starting center. They're trading there now, and I think it makes sense. So I think those are some of the first ones that come to mind for me.
Joe Sloan's name continues to pop, whether it's on the recruiting trail or a guy who's making an impact on a junior day or somebody who seems to have had a pretty big role in Jayden Daniels' recruitment. What are you hearing about LSU's quarterbacks coach?
Yeah, I've heard really good things. And honestly, when he first came in, I think there were some people who were just like, this is one of the better hires they made, And I think a lot of people didn't think that much of a La Tech coach coming to be the quarterback's coach, but kind of overqualified for this job in some ways. And I have heard that. I've heard he's a really good recruiter. I've heard that he's a coordinator too, which adds a different element of kind of how to be a quarterback coach. And he talked at length with me about that, about how if he knows what the OC's job is now, and now as a quarterback coach, he can coach the quarterbacks in a way that's helping Mike Denbrock out more. But yeah, I've heard really good things, and I think I've said since the day they hired him with you, like I think he's a guy who might actually have as high of upside. Him and Jamar King come to mind on the staff. So yeah, I think really highly of this one.
Hashtag Ask Brody from John Quav. Brody, what's LSU going to do at tight end?
That is still 100% up in the air, and I'm a broken record, but the thing I keep, going to is everything I've gathered is they just haven't liked anybody in the portal yet. Yes, they absolutely want to bring someone in from the portal. That is arguably number one on the list, but so far they haven't really liked any options, whether it's off the field red flags, whether it's just they don't think they're, quite LSU level, and they just don't want to take guys just to take guys. That's kind of been their mission here, because that's how you get in the problems LSU was in. So I think so far they're being patient with it, but if I had to put a guess, I think whether it's during the spring, whether it's after the spring, whether it's the summer, I would assume a tight end comes available if they end up liking and comes on the roster, but we'll see.
What percent would you put on this quarterback room looking the exact same it looks now as it would in the fall?
Wait, could you repeat that? I'm so sorry.
What percentage chance would you put on this quarterback room looking the exact same as it does now as it will in the fall?
Ooh, Yeah. I mean, shoot, just I don't even have inside info on this, but just, history. I don't know, 30%, it's just because history says someone's probably going to leave when you have 4 quarterbacks in a room. And the thing I always say when people, I think there's a lot of people who get up and like, get worried about that. Like, what, bringing Daniels in, someone's going to leave. And it's like, I think people are so used to the old days where it's like, you space out your quarterbacks and you have 3 and then one guy's up in 2 years, and the next guy's up in 2 years. And it's just, that just isn't the world anymore. You have 4 quarterbacks in your room, not to perfectly space out the future, but to figure out who the best talent is. And then, that's built in. Some guys will probably leave from that. That's just part of the math now. So I don't even necessarily view that as a negative, because I view it as, if Jayden Daniels comes in and is clearly the best guy, that is proof that he's a better guy. And if Jayden Daniels isn't and that he leaves, it's like, well, there's no real harm done there. So, I mean, I know it's not your question, but I think it's reasonable to assume someone might leave, but I also don't think it's a guarantee.
This is an awkward and a weird question. I don't mean to put you in a spot, but the news coming out on Frank Wilson, the latest, out of the Sharon Lewis situation in the lawsuit that Lewis has upheld. Do you expect anything to come from this? What do you make of this latest allegation?
Yeah, obviously, I appreciate the question. It's just tough to answer, quite frankly. So far, the word from LSU has been that, they are unaware of any, there was no reports, things like that, and that they are standing by Wilson at the time being. And historically, LSU does have a track record of, quite frankly, standing by until evidence is mounted. That's kind of been their game plan, I feel like, the last few years, whether it's recruiting issues, whether it's issues like this. So I think that's kind of where I default to, but that's me speculating. I'll be the first to say that. But so far, they seem to be standing by him.
How was Mardi Gras?
What a change of question.
Yes. Let's get the hell out of here, for God's sakes.
And then a perfect Mardi Gras, and then I woke up Wednesday morning with just an absolute killer sinus infection. I'm on day 7 of having it. It's not fun.
Well, get healthy, man. We'll see you around Baton Rouge during the spring. Looking forward to seeing you out there on the practice field and watching Brian Kelly implement his new strategy on LSU football. Thank you.
Absolutely. Can't wait. Take care, guys.
See you. There's Brody Miller checking in this morning from New Orleans.